Craig, thanks for joining me, mate. Appreciate you. Tell us what Walking4Warriors is, mate, from the top.
Yeah, too easy. Thanks, Lachy. I appreciate the opportunity to come and have a chat to you. And I guess I'll start with thanking Nunny for connecting us as well. So we appreciate him. But, mate, Walking4Warriors is, it's an organisation that we created 6 years ago, and it was really formed around I threw the idea out to some friends after having the opportunity to participate in an endurance challenge, which for anyone that doesn't know what that is, or an ultra marathon, it's anything over 50 kilometres basically. But we were doing a 96 kilometre challenge. It was a team event. During the process of training for that event, it was a 12-month training process. We were doing a lot of long hikes together, so 2 and 3 hours out in the bush. And what I found during those times, I was having deep personal conversations with people that I didn't necessarily have a deep and personal relationship with. It was just through the creation of a relaxed environment, So I really wanted to create a similar opportunity. But we also wanted to create something where we could challenge ourselves. And I felt strongly around the concept of doing hard things to build resilience. And I've sort of struggled with my mental health for a lot of my adult life. And I really thought and believe that I need resilience to survive. And I thought, I know that I can get it through doing difficult challenges, and those ultra marathons were that. So we wanted to sort of create an organisation that could create those activities for small groups of men or people in our community and go out and do, we call it stupid things, stuff, but, and it is that, we're talking about climbing mountains, swimming across rivers, anything crazy that's really going to put us out of our comfort zone. And through that process, we will develop that warrior mindset that we base it on, that resilience, that camaraderie and mateship and teamwork and sacrifice and endurance. So, those are the words that we built the organisation around. We obviously took those from our military, from our veterans, and our Anzac memorials have those words printed around them, and use them as our core to try and base what we do and how we live life.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that, on the idea of doing hard things to build resilience. And out of that, you get true fulfillment as well when you do something that's challenging and you conquer it almost. And then it's just like, this whole time it's like look like this big mountain, and you're up the top of the mountain, you're like, that wasn't too bad at all. And then I feel like it's a compounding effect. Like you want to do more and more and more things. And the more you do, the more resilience you build over time. And you're almost like yourself now you want to encourage others to join that journey with you. But you've also said that, we all have different lives growing up, different cultures and religions, but at the end of the day, we're all on a similar journey in life, right? Trying to just make it day by day and support those that we love.
Yeah, 100%. I think we're all we're all just trying to survive it. Obviously for some people it's quite a easy life. And I was only talking to a mate about it the other day. Ultra runners are the 1%. Let's talk about the 1% groups. There's all sorts of them out in the world there. The bike is where that terminology came from. But however, when you talk about our military, they're the 1%ers that sign up to sacrifice themselves for the protection of our, society, of all of us. We talk about our ultra runners, people that are running 100 kilometres, 100 miles and further. That's only 1% of the population. So, and I think it's important to strive to be that, and what I've learned through the last 6 or 7 years of being involved in ultra running especially, is it generally attracts the general person that does it is an addict of some description, and they've quite often got mental health challenges in their life. They're not necessarily a stable person. It takes a little bit of an unstable person to think it's a good idea to run all day and all night, and go through that hardship to run from one place to another, but what they gain through those activities, firstly, it's some stability in their life through the training. You can't run 100 kilometres on no training. You can try. And one of the things I like to say is you got two options when it comes to these sort of activities. You can prepare and train every day, and every day you'll suffer a little bit every day, and then when you take on the challenge, it won't be such a big challenge. Or you can not do any training and you got to pay the price on the day. You pay all that suffering that you could have done in little increments over the year leading up to it, or whatever the time period was. You got to pay no matter what. So you can pay it daily, or you can pay it in one big lump sum on the day. If you don't train, you better be ready to pay. You better be resilient, because it's, you're going to be tested to the limit. So I think you're far better off doing it day by day if you can. That way it's more manageable. And I think there's so many lessons to be taken from running or challenging yourself. It doesn't matter whether it's, Spartan events. We're talking about endurance activities, because it's a long time, and so you really have to be resilient to survive that long time. Anyone can suffer for a few minutes, but when you're talking about being in a horrible place for days at a time, potentially, that sort of reflects life, I think, as well, and the challenges we have with our mental health. It's not done in one day, or 1 hour, one session. It goes for the longevity of your life. And I found, with the ultra running, with the ultra marathons, there's so many lessons that we can then relate back to life. Unfortunately, me personally, my journey with the ultra running is, I've really struggled to develop the resilience through it, and I think that's I've only recently been through the process of being diagnosed with ADHD, and I think that's been a lot of the reason that I've really I haven't felt like I've grown a hell of a lot through the years of those constant challenges, and that's been very difficult for me, because a lot of people sort of they say, oh, you obviously must be mentally strong to be able to do these things, and you've done many of them. What I say, and what I know is true, is the only way I ever finished one of them, or all of them, they're all in the exact, is through having that strong team around me, having people that carried me over the finish line. And that's that's the truth. I didn't finish one of them without someone picking me up off the ground, literally, laying on the ground and crying my eyes out, not wanting to do it anymore, and supporting me to the finish line, or having a team of people that, made my body go that distance and my mind be able to handle it. So some people do it easy, some people do it hard, but I think, there's so much to be gained from it, and that's sort of what we want to try and do with Walking4Warriors, is create, replicate, participate in those activities. They're all out there. Let's just go and join in them. But we wanted to create a community locally here where we could come together, as a half a dozen people with that same sort of mindset, potentially with the same challenges, and then support each other through it.
Yeah. So I guess, who are those people that you're looking for specifically?
People that look like me, anyone and everyone, we can do it together. That's what's real interesting about ultra marathons, is the vast diversity in there. You've got people from 20 years old doing it all the way to 80 years old. You've got people that weigh 64 kilos all the way up to 120 kilos. Anyone can do it. What we're looking for is just people that are willing, the 1%ers, and you might not know it's what you need in your life until you expose yourself to that the first time, and then you go, oh, there's something in this for me, I can get something out of the suffering and challenging myself. So yeah, it's hard to know who, we're chasing anyone and everyone that's willing to do it.
Yeah, I think with everything that's difficult, it takes courage to take that first step. But once you take that first step, that's when you, again, come to that realization in that moment, or like that light bulb moment, like, this is for me. What does the annual calendar look like for Walking4Warriors? So is it different every year, or is it structured?
It's growing, so it's different every year. The one thing we created right at the start was our endurance challenge. So we hold that in April. So that was created as what I wanted to do was I thought to myself, what's the hardest thing I could do physically and mentally to demonstrate to our veterans what they mean to us and what their sacrifices mean to us? Coming from that ultra running mindset, I figured if I ran around a high school oval for 24 hours, that would be a pretty horrible way to spend 24 hours physically and mentally. And I thought that was a pretty good idea to do it. So I threw the idea out to some friends, and they all thought it was a stupid idea. Said, let's do it. So we created that first one, and the concept was, we were very lucky the first year. The timing was perfect that we did 24 hours and we finished at dawn service at Boyne Island. So we based it down at Boyne, and we finished for dawn service. So the guys that did 24 hours, we walked across the road to the cenotaph and then honoured our veterans in that way. That's our big event. We aim for 300 participants a year. We'll dive into a tiny bit more in a minute, but 3, 6, 12 and 24 hours. We wanted to open it up to more people. We'd understand that not everyone can do 24 hours. What we just ask people is that, we know why we're there. We're there to honour our veterans and our first responders. So make sure whatever you do is the biggest challenge of your, life. Potentially, don't pick the easy option, because they never do. After that, we obviously are endeavouring to do. We've really over the years taken on this focus in this mental health space and want to do something that works. Because there's so much conversation out there, and what I've sort of, obviously have lots of thoughts, random thoughts in my head, and unfortunately, I'm going to be open and honest. I think we're failing along the way. Otherwise, we would, be seeing the successes that we're chasing. Doesn't mean that what everyone's doing is not right, but I think we're really struggling to have the impact that we all want to have. So one of the areas that we really think that we can have a positive impact is just through a simple walk. I believe that walking with other people, as I said right at the start, that was why we created the organisation, because I was walking with people and I was sharing my deepest, darkest secrets, not looking for answers, but just speaking, just getting those thoughts out of your head. And walking creates the perfect environment, because we're not sitting here looking at each other. This takes a level of courage, and there's a connection here. Whereas if we were just walking side by side, we're no longer looking at each other, we're just speaking, and it breaks down that barrier. So, let's go for a 1 hour walk together. It's obviously been done in the past, and it is being done by other organisations successfully. Through that, we just talk, and we go home feeling better at the end of the day. So we're really passionate about that. I think if we were to make the biggest impact in our community, having those walks as often as we can, wherever we can. It's only such a simple thing, and then that can lead on to bigger and bigger, depending obviously what people want. They might, if we start walking for hours together in the bush, we go from the simple conversation around weather, family, jobs, all those things, into, the mental health type aspect of it and the challenges of life, and we just share those ideas. So, that's a huge thing. One of our biggest achievements in the last couple of years is the creation of our bush retreat down at Turkey Beach, which you've been fortunate enough to come and have a look at there a few months ago. So that's been fairly recent that we did that. The reality with that is my wife and I own the block of land. We were fortunate enough to be able to buy just under a couple hundred acres at Turkey Beach. We didn't want to keep it for ourselves. We want to share it with everyone, like family and friends, and also the community. So we said to Walking4Warriors, let's build a campground down there. We stole the idea from our veterans. They have veteran retreats around Australia where veterans and first responders can go and stay for free. We wanted to do the same, but let's do it for all of the community. So we built a campground. It's on about an acre. It looks out over the dam, covered in ironbark trees, kookaburras, wallabies, all that sort of stuff. We're slowly establishing some infrastructure. And the whole concept of that is it's just a safe place for people to come for a day, a night, a couple of nights. You know, there's no cost involved. We don't want any money from anyone. We can chase money to do what we need to do from sponsorship and grants and stuff like that, you know, but it's really just open for anyone within our community that wants to use it for the right purpose, which is a mental health getaway. You know, come for the weekend with the kids, just relax, do whatever you want. You know, if for example, you wanted to come down and we're in a place where you needed quiet time for yourself, you just let us know. We'll make sure no one else is there. You know, if that's what you need, if you don't mind, if there's a couple of other people there, if there's kids, you know, it's just it's an opportunity once again for community to just support each other, and we're super proud of it. You know, the big thing is we want people to utilise it. We haven't really got to that point yet, whether it's just because of the lack of infrastructure. You know, now we've got some shade shelters and some tables, and we've put a long drop toilet in. You know, we haven't got flash amenities or anything like that, but we don't need it either. So what we hope moving forward is we can create the exposure for that and just get people to come and take advantage of it. And I guess don't be scared to ask. You know, it's there where we want to share it with people. And then, you know, then we've got some other ideas for the future. But, yeah, basically that's sort of what we do. We try and do a couple of hikes a year, and, you know, we've struggled to fulfill that obligation to create all those activities. And sometimes it can be hard for me personally. You know, I struggle with it, thinking that I'm not doing enough, and every now and then you just got to pull yourself up and realise what you are doing. And we try to support as many organisations as we can as well that are like-minded. So, yeah, we're busy, I guess.
100%. And I like to touch on the point, I know myself through running or hiking, you're able to have more of an open mindset, and you start to allow to have, you're more, I guess, acceptable, or again, more open to think of ideas that you wouldn't previously. You know, when you're just in the day, you're going to your job 9 to 5, or you're just looking after the family, you tend to get stuck in this routine, in the cycle, where you don't give yourself the opportunity to be able to think about things that you might be curious about. And I know you said before we even started recording that something that women tend to have, they wake up 4:30 in the morning, they go for a walk, and they have that ability to be able to talk and just share things, that their difficulties or problems they're having in their life, and they're able to get that off their chest. And it's something that us men tend to bottle up, and it only takes for the bottle to explode that everything just falls apart.
Yeah, for sure. You know, we obviously struggle with the challenges of life, and if you're not dealing with them, they just get harder and harder. And sometimes you know, once again, I'm willing to be as vulnerable as I am. And, you know, over the years, I've been embarrassed by how little things put me in a bad mental health space. You know, it's not cancer, it's not this, it's not that. It can be as simple as, you know, my kids are not doing what I've asked them to do, or things are not going the way I wanted them to go at work. And that can be enough to spiral me, you know, with self-worth issues, you know, anxieties and things like that. Firstly, it's so simple. And once again, as I said, I recently got diagnosed with ADHD, and that's starting to make a lot of sense for me, because I understand what I should do. I just don't do it. And that's, you know, a problem. And it's simple, you know, eat, sleep, exercise, are the first 3 most important things. If you want to add 2 more to it, there's only really 5 things, you know, meditate and journal, but eat, sleep and exercise. So as you said, if you go running or walking, whatever it is, firstly, it's creating those endorphins. Secondly, you know, you're getting fit and healthy, and life doesn't seem so bad once you do some exercise. You know, you're ready to deal with it a lot better. And then, as you mentioned regarding, you know, my view on the women walking in the morning, as I sort of said, you know, they get out there at 4:30, not because they want to, you know, they'd rather be in bed, but it's probably their only time of the day that they can get away from the kids and their husbands prior to dealing with all the stresses. So they go out, and I believe they just whinge and bitch and moan about all of us, but then they come home and they're beautiful mothers and wives because they just got those thoughts off their chest. And the walk-in that I currently do, we do one on Tuesdays. I do it with a mate in Calliope, and it's only the two of us, and we do exactly the same thing. You know, we whinge and bitch and moan about all the things that are going wrong in our lives. And at the end of the day, firstly, we realise that we're all the same. You know, we're living a very similar life, all of us. People perceive us all as being different to them through whatever that, but we are all the same. You learn that very quickly once you start talking to people open and honestly, and then we go home happier and healthier at the end of it through that little bit of exercise, you know, speaking, getting those thoughts out of your head, and I believe I go home a better husband and a better father through that simple activity and a more stable person. So we want to encourage more men to do that, and you know, we think everyone can be part of the one group. You know, I don't think it's necessarily for people that are at different levels on, we'll call it the spectrum, but, you know, there's no reason why someone that's got it all worked out can't be walking with someone that doesn't have anything worked out, because that's where we support each other, and that's where the community aspect of it comes in. You know, a community is made up of all different types, all different skill sets come together within a community to be successful. Once again, we go back to our military. You know, a military team, for example, is built up of different people that bring different attributes to the team, and together they're strong, whereas individually they're lacking the skill sets that they necessarily need, and we are too in life. I think, you know, you bring something different to the table that I bring, but bringing it together and sharing it with each other, then you make me stronger and I make you stronger. So that's where I've been passionate about, you know, trying to encourage all of us to come and support each other, because we've all got something to offer.
Yeah, as much as men need their women in their life, men also need other men to talk about men stuff that only men can relate to, right?
100%.
To go into partnerships more, you've got quite a few, and a lot of them are like people like young veterans and combined services. So what affiliations do you have with them?
Yeah. You know, our relationship with young veterans and combined services is so tight. We got introduced. So when we thought of the idea of having the endurance challenge in 2021, that first one, we wanted to think, where could we give the money to that we were hoping to raise from the event? And we wanted to give it to an organisation that would use all of it, and we stumbled across Young Veterans, and I reached out to them, and they're an Australian-based organisation, and the president of Young Veterans Australia, Matt Keane, we had a phone call, and, you know, he was so open and receptive to the idea, and basically, you know, made me feel comfortable, and then introduced me to John Felton, who's our president of Young Veterans here in Central Queensland, and what was quite interesting was we basically both started here, you know, on the same day. They were just forming in January of 2021. We were just forming in January of 2021. So it was a perfect opportunity. And the good thing, the greatest thing for us to be able to support them financially, which is only a tiny part of it, is 100% of the money stays here in Central Queensland, in Gladstone, in the local region, to be used however they want. They get to choose what they spend it on, and it's all spent on veterans, you know, and then obviously our connection with combined services. So once again, Walking4Warriors is a complicated organisation, because most people think of us as a veteran-based organisation. Generally, they see our logo and Young Veterans together, or even the title of Walking4Warriors being a military sort of thing. And so we're constantly explaining to people that we're not. We're obviously a civilian organisation that's supporting our veterans through the respect and appreciation for the sacrifices they made, and also that desire to learn from them and develop that mindset and that resilience. So where was I going with that? You know, okay, so we only brought our first responders into honouring them in our endurance challenge a couple of years ago. And we did that because the veteran community brought our first responders in under the same banner as our veterans. You know, they're people that are willing to sacrifice for the, you know, they have the same attributes. So they now associate together, whereas maybe in the past there was a difference between them. But if you follow any veteran organisations online, you'll see that for them, especially the ones that are related to health and well-being, it's veterans and first responders. We, to start with, only had our relationship with our young veterans early on, and it took a little while before we could bring our first responders in. And the only reason that was because of confusion. You know, once again, who are Walking4Warriors? Are they veteran? Are they civilian? Oh, now all of a sudden you want to bring first responders in. And I think the civilian community failed to recognise just how important our first responders are and just how much they deal with. However, the veteran community doesn't have that distinction. They recognise it, so they were doing it. So it did take us just that couple of years because of the confusion as to because we created the event to honour our veterans, you know, and it was done leading up to Anzac Day, which we all understand the importance of. So it just took a little bit. However, you know, for us, the appreciation of our first responders is equal to, you know, those guys are exposed to trauma on a daily basis, you know, through their jobs, and the support that they get is potentially minimal. So it's a no-brainer, and obviously the creation of combined services here in Gladstone is something that's happened in the last few years, and a perfect organisation for us to be with. So that's our connection with those two, strong connections, yeah.
100%. Also a sponsorship, so Nunny, David and Ali Nunn, High Risk Solutions, they're your main sponsor. How can other people get involved if they want to sponsor you guys and support? What does their money go towards?
Yeah, so we don't ask. Okay, so we only get fundraising really at the moment, or sponsorship for the Endurance Challenge. As you say, Nunny's been on board from day one, and I see him as, and our relationship with him is, firstly, he's a mentor for me. He is a sponsor of Walking4Warriors. However, I don't necessarily ask for any money from him on a yearly basis, but I'll put his logo on everything and anything that I've got, because we have And I know that if I need money, I can just go and talk to him and he will support us, but we don't sort of go. However, the Endurance Challenge, you know, and we've been so fortunate and very proud of the businesses that we've developed relationships, because I take it extremely, and we do, as a team, we take it very seriously, taking money from organisations. It's very, to us, it's a very important thing. So we have to honour those companies, and we've been very fortunate through the guys that have been on board right from the start and generally come back every year, that and they've generally got a connection with our veteran community and also with that mental health space, which has been great. But, you know, Bendigo have obviously been one of our biggest sponsors right from the very beginning. I walked into the Bendigo branch to open an account for the organisation, and the lady said to me, well, why aren't you asking us for some money? And I said, didn't know you wanted to give any. But Bendigo as an organisation support a huge amount of the community, and they've been on board from day one, and we've just got a fantastic relationship with them. You know, Gladstone Regional Council, with all the grants that are available for organisations, have been huge. Then we link ourselves with some of the smaller organisations that are in town, like Walls have been on board, ACES, the Shed Company, a whole heap of them over the years. We only take and we only ask for just enough money really to run the event. And then what we're super proud of with the Endurance Challenge is that every dollar that our participants pay for registration is 100% fundraising. We cover all the expenses of the event, the T-shirts, the fireworks that we put on, all the food and everything through that sponsorship and grants that we get every year. And that way we can proudly say that 100% of the dollar that you give us, the $70 registration, that we've never changed, and we always wanted to keep it at the minimum amount. You know, I've entered some ultra marathons where it's $700 registration sort of thing, whereas, $70 a year to come and participate, honour our veterans, and 100% of that goes straight back into the community support. Firstly and foremostly, our young veterans, whatever they need from us, it's there through that money. Our combined services, however we can support them, whether it's financially or through, anything that we can do to help them. And then obviously us as an organisation help us run, and the things that we're trying to do with that bush retreat especially and that. But so yeah, obviously we reach out this time of the year as when we're starting to look for sponsors, because it takes a while to create the shirt and we want everyone's logo to be on the shirt. So we need a commitment as early as we can. So we're just in the process of reaching out to organisations now to see who wants to jump on board and be part of what we're doing. And then we'll go ahead and make the event happen again for 2026. So obviously if someone wants to sponsor us in any way, just message Walking4Warriors or talk to someone, and that person will talk to us, find out who we are and where we are. But we've got a real big passion for supporting other organisations. We've got heaps that we've supported with Warfighter Coffee, but even groups like Gladstone Roadrunners, our mental health organisations in town through Mind Care and Grasp, and our suicide bereavement organisations, and that we want to create as much exposure as we can for anyone doing good in the community any way we can. And it's not about taking money off people. It's about, I always work on the theory is what can I give them more than what I can get from them? How can we, provide a better service than anything we receive? So we get them to come and volunteer at the event if they want to, put up marquees, get the word out for who they are. As we spoke about earlier, really one of the biggest struggles we have is just getting the message out that we exist. Most of Gladstone doesn't even know that endurance challenge is there. It's been running we've done 5 years. We've raised $100,000 over that 5 years. We get an average of 220 participants down there at Boyne Island, and most of Gladstone doesn't even know that it exists. So trying to get the message out is the biggest challenge.
Well, I guess I was going to ask you that too. Like, how can people, register or be able to participate in these events? How can sponsors contact you, and how can people help share and build awareness of Walking4Warriors?
Yeah. So there's obviously social media is the first and foremost easiest way to be part of Walking4Warriors and keep up to date with what we're doing. Social media is a real challenge for people because it's designed to target what you think about and speak about. So if you're not talking about Walking4Warriors, it's not on your feed. If you're not talking about veterans and mental health and blah, 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 it's not on your feed. So social media is very difficult to get to work well. It seems to me like the best tool that's out there. It just doesn't work very well, unfortunately. However, it's what, everyone uses. So Walking4Warriors has its own Facebook page, and that we obviously have our discussion group, which was the very first thing we created, and we've kept running, and that's a place where we can share videos and whatever regarding resilience, warrior mindset, thought processes. I get on there and dribble regularly about, the struggles I have. And the reason I do that is because I hope that it may have a positive impact. I'm not looking for sympathy or necessarily anything. I just share it because I hope that maybe someone will go, I'm glad someone said that because I'm feeling the same. Our website, we're fortunate to have a fantastic website, which once again, Nunny helped us create. The team that Nunny has there helped us create and support us so much with that. They let us break it all the time, and then they come along and fix it. When we first start, I'm one of these people that want to be involved in everything. So once we created it, I went along and learnt how to make pay, and I'd break it all, and then I'd give it back to Dre and say, can you put it back together for us? You can see what I was trying to do, and he'd fix it and give it. It's, I can just do it. I want to be hands-on with it. But, the website's obviously a fantastic place to get information, but I think social media is that first point, really. In this day and age, I think we just use those websites as a platform to register and buy merchandise and all that sort of thing. But all our information is there.
What's the next event coming up again? I think you mentioned it earlier.
So we are obviously currently doing our walks. So one of the fantastic organisations that recently opened in town is at Bob's Garage through McCosker's, just around the corner here in Gundoon Street sort of thing. And once again, we didn't know it was there, and this is this breakdown and, it's just so hard for everyone to know what everything's happening out there. But we reached out to those guys and said, can we be part of what yous are doing, obviously around mental health, men's mental health especially, and let's restart our weekly walks. We'd tried doing them in the past here in Gladstone in the evening. So anyway, long story short, we're doing a weekly walk every Monday at 5:30 p.m. from Bob's Garage for men. We go for a 1 hour. We walk down to East Shores, back up and around. We have a general conversation. We're doing a hike on the 11th of November, I think it is. Hopefully I got that date right, up on the rail trail, which is a 12-kilometre hike, which will be heaps of fun for anyone that wants to participate in that. We recently did one at Crumblett Tops, which is just a beautiful place to walk. Unfortunately for most people, it's not necessarily always accessible, just the way the walk is, it's a point to point. So as an organisation, we can help in that with the transportation, so it gets people that opportunity to walk through that one little bit of one of our national parks and enjoy the beauty of it. I think we're just opening up our registrations for next year's Endurance Challenge now, which is on the 18th and 19th of April. So we try and run it just before Anzac Day now, and that lets our veterans have more of a participation in it. The first one was obviously at Anzac Day, but then the guys come along and said, we want to be part of this. So now we do it just before, when we can find the right date to have it on the weekend. And, one of our recent relationships that we've just started creating is with Walk and Talk from Rockhampton. We want to participate with those guys on the Saturday. We think what they're doing is fantastic. Once again, like I said, we're about supporting whatever organisations are out there trying to save lives is the reality. And anyone that wants to save lives, we want to help and support and have a connection with. So we're going to jump on board with those guys on the 11th, which is next weekend, and go for a walk with them, which was awesome. Can't wait for that. And what they're doing is fantastic work. And then moving forward in the future, we'll hopefully partner with them a heap more and share the workload.
Yep. So on the weekly, you walk once a week, one group walk a week? Yeah,
so we have tried having them at Boyne Island, Calliope and Gladstone in the past. The Boyne one was fairly successful for a while, and then I moved and things happened, so we sort of stopped that. We thought Gladstone was the best place to do one, and we did one here for a year. Once again, it's all about exposure. I don't think it's anything to do, well, I hope it's not to do with me that people don't turn up. I just think it's getting the message out there. But yeah, right now we've just started the one in Gladstone, again, based out of Bob's Garage, thinking that's the perfect place to do it from. 1 hour on a Monday at 5:30. We're looking at doing more during the week. Sian, who is our president, is looking at doing a women's walk on a Thursday or something like that shortly. Yep. Give the ladies an opportunity. Generally, we open all our activities up to men and women. We're not specific. We need to get to the point as men where we're comfortable talking with women as well. But sometimes for us, it needs to start in that safe environment. Another fantastic organisation or concept out there is our men's circles, which I was only recently introduced to it over a year ago. However, and once again, open and honest and willing for any criticism. But I honestly believe that sometimes that men's circle is maybe just a little intense for people that have never spoken before. It's quite an emotional, environment. I think it's fantastic, and I think we should all participate in it. But I also think that our weekly walks are the perfect introduction to talking that can then lead to participating in other activities like that. Like I said, we start with a 1 hour, we whinge and bitch and moan about everything and anything. We all go home feeling that we're all on the same page. From there, let's go for a 3 hour walk in the bush. I guarantee you we'll talk about more than just, kids and wives. And then from there, we start to understand the importance of talking and sharing, and we can look into all those other opportunities, go for 24 hours together. You walk with someone for 24 hours and suffer, that's where it gets serious.
Yeah,
The
100%.
conversation goes, wherever it needs to go. And yeah, so that's why we support obviously men's circles and everything that's out there.
Yeah, I think it's bloody awesome. What is the future of Walking4Warriors? Where do you see Walking4Warriors going the next 5-10 years?
Along the same path it's going at. However, one of the, I think that we've got all the ideas, we're just not executing any of them well, in my personal opinion. And that's no disrespect to anyone, because, I stand up there out at the front saying that I feel like I fail in everything we do. Some of that's through the mental health stuff. But the reality is if no one turns up, you aren't succeeding. So we need participation in everything we do. We need to get better at all of that sort of thing. We need to create more activities. We need help. We can have a committee doing the background work, the accounting, the reaching out to organisations and that sort of stuff. But ultimately what we need moving forward is people that have the same passion for the concept of what we're talking about, what we have just spoken about, people who believe in that enough to go, I want to be part of that. I want to participate in the events, but I want to also help. If you said to me that you wanted to organise a walk or you had an idea for a challenge or something, I'll just embrace it and we'll run with it. I need other people that can lead activities that are, just willing to stand up and lead. Unfortunately, I've got an extremely busy life, with the farm, with the job, with the family. So my time is getting less and less, which is, my challenges in life, but I'll always be available to do things. But, if we had more people, we could do more activities. Why don't we climb Mount Lachy? Because I can't do it. I don't have enough free time in my week and month to do it. Whereas if we had more leaders within our organisation and we support them through, we have the insurances, we can do the risk assessments, we have the equipment, all that stuff. What we need is people that are passionate about making a difference through challenge. We understand it's not for everyone. We talked about that, the 1%ers. If you want to be a 1%er, come and climb a mountain with us. One of the big, once again, that bush retreat, I don't know anyone else out there in Australia doing what we're doing with that. There probably is, but, we need to be extremely proud of it. We need to get the message out there. We need to make it a success. How to do that, I'm not 100% sure, whether it's through more exposure with the big organisations, getting them involved. I don't know, but it's a failure unless people are using it. We can spend all the money we want on making it look beautiful and pretty, but if you don't come and stay there, then what was the point? So we need people to use what we're doing. We can have barbecues as often as you want. We need people to turn up to them and help make it happen. I understand everyone's busy. I appreciate that. But I reflect back on the people that I know that are doing the most good in the community, and they're the busiest people I know. I can name so many of them that have full-time jobs, run organisations, volunteer, do everything they can, turn up to events. You want to talk about someone who's busy, those people are busy. The rest of us are just making excuses to a certain extent, aren't we? One of the big passions we have, and we nearly started it a year ago, but then I had some issues with my mental health and decided it wasn't the right time, was this concept around mentoring our youth. So what we want to do, and we could have done it, and we potentially in hindsight should have done it. I just wasn't ready to lead it, and I'm potentially still not the right person to lead it. But the idea is we partner with Cogsy, once again another high risk solution initiative, but that organisation supporting our youth of Gladstone, partner with those guys and our PCYC mentors through combined services and young veterans. We get a group of kids, youth, young adults, and we participate in the Kokoda Challenge on the Gold Coast, be it 48 kilometres or 96 kilometres sort of thing. Through that, we'll mentor the youth. This is where there's a lot of responsibility on us as an organisation before we do it to get it to be ready, because I'm very conscious of the fact that once we commit to it, we can't let anybody down. So we need enough people to support it where we've always got someone to be there for them on the training sessions that we have. You know, we hold the kids accountable, we mentor them, we build resilience in them, we take them out there and beat them up in the bush sort of thing and expose them to hard situations. They come out of it feeling proud and confident of themselves, you know, and then they become our future leaders in our community. And from there, hopefully something like that can just continue to grow. We bring those youth back in next year as the leaders of the next lot of people that are involved in it, and who knows where that concept could go. So, you know, that's always on my mind, that activity. I think it's extremely important for us to touch, you know, have an impact on those vulnerable ones, you know, in that year 11, year 12 type age bracket. They're about to enter the big wide world. Let's give them some of that support and mentorship that they don't get through schools and even their parents, you know. Let's be open and honest with them, talk about mental health and the impacts it has on our lives daily, how we struggle through it, because as we keep saying, we all live in the same lives. Those guys are going to come and live the same life that I've been living, as you've been living, and everyone else is living. So we know some of them are going to struggle with their mental health. We know some of them are unfortunately going to, you know, attempt suicide, and some will be successful. But if we can just, even if it's only a dozen of them a year or 4 of them a year, have a positive impact on them, you know, that will exponentially grow over time. And so that's, to me, one of the big things. So, yeah, you know, continue to what we're doing, just be better at it somehow.
Craig, if you had any last words for anyone listening about Walking4Warriors and why they should get involved, what would you want to say?
I guess I would want to say don't be scared. You know, I was scared to join our running groups in Gladstone because I'm overweight, you know. I'm a bald, middle-aged, overweight man. You know, I don't fit into the demographics of a runner. However, I was accepted from day one with our trail running group down at Boyne, our Tannum Wild Runners, our Gladstone Road Runners. You know, all the running. Running is an extremely difficult activity, and especially if you're not built for it. And people now understand that and accepting of everyone that do it. You know, it's no longer for the people that are built to run, it's for everybody. And, you know, I don't run very well, but everyone's always been accepting of me, and Walking4Warriors will be accepting of you as well. You know, this is what we're basing it off, the fact that the ultra running community was accepting of me and who I am and made me feel part of their community. We want to create a community where everyone's accepted, where we, just a good community. And I keep going on about that community because I think that's the best way we can make a difference in the world, is if we start to build those strong communities again. And we're, we're titled Walking4Warriors, but there's no reason Walking4Warriors can't be so many different things. You know, we've done programs this year with Cosmos Art Therapy, equine therapy. We've reached out and supported those organisations because we see value in it. Ride for Life, you know, riding motorbikes is a great way to deal with your mental health. Having coffee with your mates is a great way. So we gave some money to Mindcare Cafe to free coffees for anyone that wants to go and talk. So, you know, our endurance challenge makes a huge difference to our veteran community. Come and be part of it. Let it be a every year event. Don't make us stress about, will it continue next year? Are we going to get people to be part of it? You know, we've got the options 3, 6, 12 and 24. You know, if you've done 24 hours, you've proven that you're a badass. You know, you're willing to suffer. You don't have to keep doing 24 hours. Come and do 3 or 6. You know, we obviously encourage people to challenge themselves, but more importantly, come and be part of it, because it's making a difference in the lives of the veterans. And as we say, hopefully you get to talk to John at some point, and he'll share the sentiment. I'm not saying, you know, only what I feel, but one of the proudest things I am of that endurance challenge, and it was never the intentions of it, was we really feel like we broke down a barrier between the civilians and the veterans in our local community, and it needs to be Australia-wide. Whereas now we, you know, because of our relationship, because of that event, firstly, as a civilian, you should now have the confidence, especially if you participated in the challenge and demonstrated your appreciation, to go and have coffee with them, to drink with them, to be part of their barbecues, and support our veterans. But more importantly for those guys, and I'm very careful about how I speak about veterans because I'm not one, but I believe they now feel more accepted in the community because of that event, because we're all there together. We originally created it as civilians honouring our veterans, and I always say that, it was never about the veterans being part of it, but they jumped on board and saw it and wanted to be part of it. And because of their desire, their wanting to be part of it, we broke down that barrier. It wasn't our intentions at the start. We never even, sort of knew that it was there, but through the things that happened. And so now we all hang out together and it's easy, and they feel accepted in the community. They're more confident. So that's a big thing. That endurance challenge is changing the lives of people, and hopefully you can get more, we can get that message out there, just how important it is, more than the money. The money in the end doesn't matter to anyone. Money doesn't necessarily save lives. What saves lives is us talking and us being friends, so we need to do more of that. Let's do it through Walking4Warriors use it for what it can be used for. We can do anything we want with it, really.
I think we'll leave it there. That was perfect.
Cool.
I think it's a great way to, for men to take that step, get shit off their chest, and then build that momentum in their life and get out of the hole that they've unfortunately fallen and all created for themselves and get on with it.
Yep. Life's hard. We know it is, and it's going to have ups and downs and lots of downs, and they're horrible places to be. We need to be strong enough to come out of them, because if you're not, we know where that eventually goes for people, and that's not what we want for anyone, ourselves included.
Definitely.
And we want to support each other through that mateship.
100%. All right.
Let's do it.
Craig, thank you.
Appreciate it, mate.